Daryl Eisenberg from Eisenberg Dean's Casting. Our casting office works across all mediums. We've worked on Broadway musicals, regional Shakespeare projects, independent feature films, fictional episodic podcasts, commercials, new media, you name it, we've probably worked on it in some way, shape, or form. I am currently quarantining in New Jersey, and my partner, Allie Beans, is currently quarantining in Dallas, Texas. We are a 100% female-owned casting office, and for that, I am very proud. My ideal self-tape is an opportunity for me to get to know an actor, even if I haven't previously met them physically in the room. Especially now, given that so much of our pre-screening, so much of our self-taping is going to occur virtually, I don't necessarily have the opportunity to really dive in and get to know the scope of an actor's work. So an ideal self-tape gives me a glimpse as to the depth of what an actor can do, even within the confines of the material that we've sent them. So I want a self-tape that looks like the actor that's going to show up on set, that sounds like the actor that's going to show up on set, and we get a little sense of who this actor is, how they work, and how they're going to fit into the greater scheme that is our creative team and our full cast. So although sometimes it's just a little bit of material, I have to learn a lot from that initial self-tape. So for me, an ideal self-tape is the beginning of the story, the beginning of the conversation with the actor in this role, and it gives me a full sense as to what I'm getting if and when we hire that actor. The biggest mistake I see actors making with their self-tapes is not sending it in. By and large, I'd say at least 50% of our self-tape requests go unanswered. If we're asking you to put something on tape, put it on tape. It doesn't have to be perfect. I often say that perfect can be the enemy of the good when it comes to self-tapes. I want my self-tapes to arrive. I want them to arrive on the time frame that I've requested them. And I want it to be a tape that looks and sounds like the actor that we potentially want to hire. But so often I find actors are waiting for that perfect moment, the perfect lighting, the perfect quiet apartment, ultimate familiarity with the material and the role, a good hair day, a good skin day, that right outfit. We don't need any of that. We understand that a self-tape, it's just the beginning. It's just replicating what we would normally get during a pre-screen process with an actor in the room. But since we aren't afforded the opportunity to be physically connected with an actor, the self-tape just lets us have a little bit of an idea as to who this actor is and what they would do with this role. But I've watched that tape. You can't be in the mix if we don't at least get that self-tape. I don't care if it's not perfect. I don't care if you stumbled on a line. Sure, yes, you have the ability to retake, to redo a take if you find that, you stumbled on a word like I just did, or if you didn't get that note, etc. I get that you can have multiple passes. In fact, that's one of the great things that a self-tape can afford an actor. But ultimately, I just want to know that this is an example of what you can do. If it's overproduced, if I hear voiceovers, if I see strange editing, that's not what I want. I just want a very basic introduction to an actor. But more than anything, I just want the self-tape to begin with. So please, if you get a self-tape request, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to arrive on time. I don't have many non-negotiable elements for a self-tape. I mean, perhaps in the broadest sense, I want you to use the material I sent you. I want the tape to look and sound like you. I want it to be appropriate for what we're working on. But that's really it. There's not too many non-negotiables. Even when we get it, if you have an issue, if you need an extra day, ask. For any number of reasons, we may be flexible on that turnaround time. Or I may say, the team is going to review everything on Friday morning, make an offer Friday afternoon, so no, you can't have the weekend. But at least you can ask and we can give you that information. We really don't have many non-negotiables. We're here to elevate the actor and to amplify those voices and to be a support. I know it's cheesy and every casting director says this, but we really are there to champion the actor. I've seen a lot of self-tapes in my day, and especially in the past 8 to 9 months. Some of them have been fantastic. Some of them have been interesting. A few of them have been really memorable. The worst self-tape, ultimately, we were working on a musical and someone sent in simply just the voiceover. So it was a black screen and we just heard the voice, which is not very useful for us when we're working on the theatrical production. We need to know what the body's doing in relation to that voice. So although we were able to correct it, we were able to reach out to the actor and say, hey, you sound great, but we need to see you as well. And they were able to send in another video that had both the voice and the face attached. It wasn't an ideal start. And if we had a faster turnaround, it may have meant that actor would just not be in consideration anymore. For that same project, we had an actor who had sent a very clear voiceover vocal performance where we could see their mouth moving, but the audio did not line up, which is hard. I get, yes, with rehearsal and with some finesse, you can sort of judge that vocal performance, but by and large, we want to see it in real time, one take straight through. So that was also a less than ideal tape, but again, we were able to rectify it. My favorite self-tape that I guess would have been considered perhaps also one of the worst, but the actor was able to make it work, was maybe 3-4 years ago. We were working on a project and the actor was like, look, I can't get to a quiet spot in my house. So I'm going to do this entire self-tape from the front seat of my car. And they found context in the song to really make it work as to why they were in a car. And it ended up being hilarious and memorable. And so they were able to take a circumstance and say, look, I can't get to a quiet spot in my, and get into the car and hold our attention the entire self-tape. And so I thought it was pretty genius. You work with what you got, and what that actor had was a nice interior of a car to really wail. It still stands out in my mind as a really interesting self-tape. And to this day, I tell actors, like, you don't need a perfect setting. I don't need a blank wall. If you're doing it in front of your shower curtain, okay. If you're doing it sitting on the toilet in front of your shower curtain, okay. Even now, I don't have the perfect setup. I've got windows behind me, which is generally, from a lighting perspective, a big no-no. But it's what I've got, and it's what I can make work. And so for an actor, try to just make it work. But ultimately, remember what we're looking for, right? We're looking for a self-tape that gives us insight to who that actor is. That means we need to hear you and we need to see you. But so many of those other details really don't matter. Yes, there's a preferred blank background and strong lighting with a ring light. And yeah, it gives a nice polished look. But if you don't have that set up for whatever reason, that's okay too. Ultimately, that stuff will happen during production. What I want to see is who you are and what you're going to bring to that role. But I ultimately want to know who you are. And without all of those pieces of the puzzle, it's hard to adjudicate a self-tape appropriately. There are some standard things that I think make a very clean and accessible self-tape. Now, obviously, if you can't get to all of these points, that's okay. What matters is you do the self-tape. But in an ideal world, if we could have everyone have access to the same equipment and the same lighting and the same sound, there are some basic parameters that I think make for an enjoyable video, that one that catches a casting director's eye and lets us get all the way through. First, have whatever your camera is, and an iPhone camera, it's fine. The quality is pretty tremendous on an iPhone or a smartphone or even your laptop camera. Those are high enough quality to give us the footage that we need to understand who it is that we're looking at. Make sure that camera is on something stable. So either prop it up on some books if you have a tripod. And what I wouldn't recommend is having that camera or that laptop on your lap. I've given this note a lot during classes that I've taught, et cetera, that we can tell when that camera is not stable. And I'm actually usually the guilty party in those classes when I'm sitting back in my armchair with my computer on my lap. But ultimately for a self-tape, you want something that's stable, something that's not moving with your body. So I want your body to be free to move. I want you to be engaged fully, not just in your voice, not just in your face, but in your whole body, right? Because acting, it's not just here, it's everywhere. So having a stable camera allows your body to move freely. I like lights that are facing you. Overhead lights are okay, but you can get a $6 ring light on Amazon and pop it over your iPhone camera or on your computer camera. I have one of them. They're fine. And that at least gives a little bit more brightness, gets rid of some of the shadows, but lights should be head on. Again, I've got the no-no. I actually have windows behind me. Don't do as I do. Do as I say. Don't have the windows behind you because that can backlight your body and we can lose some of the detail of your face. And again, we do want to have access to your emotions, access to your face. So stable camera, lights facing you, and generally the internal microphone in your phone or in your computer, that's generally enough. If you want to get a lav mic, one of those little, clip-on mics, that's fine. If you want an external microphone, you want to look like a cool game show host, that's okay too. But a handheld is dangerous because again, then you're losing your ability to act fully. You lose that hand. But generally, I actually think the internal microphone does enough for you. If it's a musical theater audition, it gets a little bit more complicated because you need to have both the accompaniment and your voice. But generally, if you have a karaoke track or in theory, someone's playing keyboard, as long as they are, within your quarantine pod, then again, the internal microphone should be enough. Generally, this is a musical theater tip as well. What I don't love is when an actor has a headphone in and they can hear the accompaniment, but we only hear it a cappella. That's a lot less telling to us. By and large, these self-tapes are meant to recreate what would have happened had you come into a pre-screen, had you come into a first-round audition in the room with us. We can't do that. I don't know when we're ever really going to go back to that as the status quo again. So the self-tape is meant to, in a way, replicate that environment where we can hear the accompaniment, we can hear your voice. Or if it's not a musical piece, we can see you fully in your whole body. So that's lighting, that's sound, that's the stability of the camera. Now your backdrop. Yes, sure, a neutral wall or one of those nice little blue screens behind you. Lovely. Does it matter? Nope. Can you do it in front of your shower curtain? Sure. Can you do it in front of a bookcase? Okay. Can you do it in your kitchen? I don't care. Can you do it with your roommate walking past? All right. Your cat? Sure. None of that matters. Yes, ideally a solid wall, maybe something blue or gray. That would be great. But if it's not, it's not, and it doesn't matter. And I don't want actors to feel like, oh, well, I can't go set up my blue screen today, so I'm not going to do my self-tape today. Nope. None of these things actually matter. This is just, if you can, sure, it doesn't hurt. It will help elevate the shot a little bit. But again, none of this is a deal breaker. None of this is required. But if you have access to these things, or if you can set up something similar, it's a good idea to at least get a nice solid self-tape so we can focus on you, the actor, and your performance. Great, so we sent you a self-tape request and you've put the material on camera for us, and now you have a little file sitting on your desktop. Now what? We are generally pretty clear about our instructions and how we want to receive that tape back. By and large, we will use some sort of uploading site where you upload it into our system. We have a profile created for with your resume and your pictures, etc. And we send that as a whole pretty link with a whole package over to our creative team where they can look by role per actor, and then in that actor's profile see their resume, their headshots, and their tape, and maybe some of our feedback notes as well. Generally, we'll tell you how you can upload into that system. If you don't have that information readily available or it's unclear, ask us. We are not the boogeyman. We want to help. We're here to support the actor. And so however you initially received that self-tape request, I bet you there's a reply or a reply all button where you can get back to us and ask any questions you have. We try to be a very open casting office. If an actor asks a question, we are always going to go answer it. But we also don't need back and forth a thank you loop over and over again on every single self-tape, because again, we are going through many self-tapes for every role. Part of the great thing about self-tapes is that we can ask for a lot more self-tapes than we would potentially for pre-screens in the room for every role. So I don't need a thank you for this audition. I love this material. Thank you. And then 2 days later, right, well, when are we going to hear? Okay, thank you. I don't need that feedback, that thank you loop. We imagine you are thankful, as are we thankful to you for putting the material on tape. But it's a job interview, and it's the first step of a job interview. Yes, if you've gone through multiple rounds of callbacks, a thank you note's always kind. It's always well received, not a requirement, but we don't roll our eyes at it. But if there's a constant barrage of thank you simply for reviewing the submission, and a thank you for the self-tape request, and a thank you for allowing me to upload my self-tape, and a thank you for viewing that self-tape, and a thank you for it's been 2 weeks since that self-tape upload, we don't need that, and it's interpreted more as you're just fishing for feedback. And if we have feedback, we'll give it to you. But sometimes it's impossible to give feedback on every single self-tape, because if we requested 200 self-tapes for every role, and we've got 15 roles in the film that we're working on right now, I can't go and give even a you're welcome to every single one, although I wish I could, and perhaps one day that will be the onus of etiquette on us. But for now, I don't necessarily need a thank you for every step of an audition process, but if it's earnest and heartfelt, sure, be my guest, reach out.
They're extra absorbent tampons. Hardly worth arresting me for.
Funny.
I usually get mine at a grocery.
This is a reader who's clearly on the phone.
And you have a favorite brand?
Maybe.
Well, the guy that you freaked out in the pickup is the father of a Marine, and she has a favorite brand too. He called me on the way to the post office and asked me to add these to her care package.
You stop just for that.
I do whatever it takes. The least I can do for our troops is give them what they want.
Last time I checked, our troops want gear that works.
What are these?
The vests you've been sending, courtesy of this man. We have proof that faulty vests have come from your organization. You've been buying shoddy armor at a discount.
No.
So this tight shot's not doing her any favors.
No.
Every time she moves, she's pushing herself out of frame and out of focus.
I started my organization because my father, his father, and my grandfather before him all served.
She looks great.
I did it to honor their memory, their sacrifice.
Hi, I'm Faith Clark-Stobler, and it is nice to meet you.
Guys, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you for sending in your self-tape. I always say that a self-tape submitted is a successful self-tape, that you've gotten most of the way there simply by just doing it. I thought it was lovely. You are a beautiful actress, like just absolutely beautiful. And I want to see more of you. And I think my biggest hurdle with your self-tape wasn't the vocal quality, it wasn't audio visual, like all the lighting, all the technical stuff is great. It was your framing. And it's funny because right now your framing is also kind of strange. It's a square and it's not sort of the full screen. So when we are limited to a self-tape, we just don't have as much information to go on because we aren't live in a room with you. We can't talk to you. We can't sort of take in from head to toe all of you. We have to make our adjudications purely on what we're getting on camera. And so I want to be able to have as much information about you as possible. And some of that is just the physical information. Your framing was tight. It was like collarbone up. Now, collarbone up, you're gorgeous. Like, yes, we want to see collarbone up on you. I want to see more. I want to be able to get a sense of what the full package, what the full physical package looks like. Because when we're hiring you, we're hiring all of you. You're going on set and you are a human being, but I don't have any information below that collarbone. So some of that may be simply adjusting your framing where you're maybe waist up or even chest up, just giving a bit more of like proportion and sizing. Even now, I don't actually know very much about you physically because you're still kind of chest up and you're wearing a bulky jacket with layers. You got to think smart, right? You know that you are a beautiful actress and let us see that. Even if in your character choice, you're like, oh yeah, but my character would wear this and a hoodie because they've got, they like to be modest and they're covered. Like, let's strip some of that away and play the game a little. Like, yeah, but I want to know what you look like. So find a choice for your character and what they would be wearing that still allows us to get the information we need when we're not physically in a room with you. So not as tight of a frame, clothing where I actually can just like see what we're working with and just have a sense of like what the proportion is. And when you're in such a tight frame, all I have is this. This is all I have to know about you. And so both that I want to know what you look like, I also want to know how you live in your body, right? Because acting's not just here, it's everywhere. And I'm still not getting that information when we have a tight frame. And sometimes our technical concerns start to bleed into some of the creative concerns here. Now this scene, I get it, it's a procedural, it's straightforward, but it's flat, right? Your character is living in a very constrained world. You've got a lot of self-restraint in the scene, which is causing us not to have as much dynamic as any other scene might give us. So when we're only living and playing in a tiny little world, and the scene is living and playing in a tiny world, we start to get so zoomed in, so we don't learn very much about you and your ability and your range. And so part of it's also knowing self-tape, it's just our information is limited. Let's give a gift to the adjudicators, to the casting director, to the team of like, this is what I can do as an actor in a broader sense, even within the reality of the scene work that I've been given, because we don't have any other information about you. I don't get to see you say hello. I don't get to have chit chat with you. I don't even get to see you with your hair down in your self-tape, right? I get such a limited insight to who you are and what you do that with such a tight frame and with such a flat scene, I don't know very much. It's not dynamic. It's not charismatic. It's not compelling. Now, yes, that might very well be the scene you are handed by a casting director and they're like, here, do this. And you're like, there's not much to do here. But even then, you can make some choices with how you set up your self-tape, what you wear, that you're giving us more perhaps than we've even asked for in the scene, which gives us a more 3D picture of who you are as a performer and not just this very tight, very condensed version of faith. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Great. But other than that, the lighting was great. Makeup is like, come do my makeup, please. You look fantastic. And so all of the other things that you did, like, great, yes, lovely. You know exactly what you're doing here. So now let's really perfect it and give us even more information about faith because we like what we're seeing. I just need to know that I know what we're getting if we hire you, and I don't quite know that yet because we're so hyper-focused, both in the framing and in the scene work. And so if you change the scene work, you can change your framing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Know you as an actor.
I appreciate it. It was nice to meet you.
Others lay down now.
I'm going to restart the self-tape because I don't know how this tape is starting. So I'm rewinding, and that's a problem.
Others lay down now, dear. Correct or incorrect?
Correct.
It's lie. You lie down. You lay something down.
It took all of my brain power to get context at the first 30 seconds. I get if this is the side I sent them, I'd have the context, but if I don't, if this is, just material they pick for themselves, I have no context. I have no idea what's going on, which makes it hard to adjudicate what you're doing. And that's a technical issue, not a side issue.
Down to sleep. It shouldn't be lie.
No. And why not? Speak it. Come on.
When I lie down, I am subject of the sentence. But when I lay myself down to sleep, myself is the object being laid down.
My motherfuckers. Born again. Literated and shit. You're a good study, man.
We can talk a little bit about vulgarity and sides, and whether it's sides given to you or your own material. I err on the side of caution.
I'm going a month. This is part of my early release. That and cancer.
Nigga, what? Are you dying from it?
Nah, man.
So the audio quality is really bad, which makes me uncomfortable because I'm not so sure what our actor just said on camera, and I'm not so sure if I should feel uncomfortable what the actor just said on camera.
You know actor? Ron's Neta in here?
Yeah.
He got me booked up with this reintegration organization, or,
Still can't hear the reader. Still have no idea what's going on in the scene. Again, not a problem if I gave them the scene, but a problem if they pick their own scene.
Shit, man.
You getting out.
Getting out. Guarantee with what?
Because the audio is really not helping. There's a lot of dropping of words. I can't hear the reader, which is not letting me connect with what he's saying, which is not making me sympathetic to him as an actor.
Whoops. Are yesterday.
No. They'll be yesterday. They're not there yet. You want the kind of money you're looking for? They're the only place you're gonna get it. You gotta go through Caesar to reach them.
How long you known Caesar?
Since I went
He
inside.
protects you. You're his token speak
I work for him.
in exchange for protection.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Oh, I know how it works. You do for him, he does for you. I get what he does for you. But what do you do for him?
So there's a lot of error in this tape, and I'm going to put a lot of that responsibility on the reader, but ultimately it's the actor to help their reader set them up for success. And this a lot of this tape is faulty because of the lag of the reader, the pacing of the reader, and the inaudibleness of the reader. Which is hard when it's Bernardo's tape and the reader is really the problem, but it's Bernardo's reader.
Hi, my name is Leonardo. I'm from Dominican Republic. I have been living in New York since last year. I have been traveling back and forward to my country since I decided to be an actor.
Well, hi, I'm Daryl Eisenberg. It's really lovely to chat with you. So I just watched your self-tape. So first, I just want to commend you. Doing a self-tape at all is hard. I get it. I've had so many struggles just now with my own lighting and sound and uploading. And so just the ability that you were able to get from beginning to end of the self-tape is no small feat. So thank you for doing it. What is your material from? And I think one of my biggest concerns with this tape is that I had such a hard time understanding it that it kept me from really connecting with you. So just clue me in. Was this a procedural? Was this a feature? What was the material from?
Oh, it's a feature. Who sent me the feature was an agency. So it was like for a feature film.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's problematic when I'm watching a tape and I can't immediately understand the context of the scene or what the medium is. It just keeps me from really absorbing the action and therefore being able to fairly adjudicate your work in it. Obviously, if this was a self-tape I had sent you, I would have known the material. I would have been intimately familiar with the plot and the character and what we were looking for, but I didn't, which meant that a lot of the technical issues, and some audio issues especially, just prevented me from really just falling in love with you and the work that you were doing on camera, because I spent so much brain space trying to catch all the different words and really understand context. And part of it was, a lot of it was, we had a remote reader. And thank you for having a remote reader. It's the safe and responsible thing to do. We can do social distancing, even on our self-tapes. But it means that there's some technical concerns with a remote reader. And a lot of it is that lag time, when you're waiting for them to finish speaking and then you can start again. We don't get that real time back and forth because you're just dealing with a lag on everybody's end of the computer, which left a lot of dead air with your reader. So there's just a lot of things working against some energy here. And I think a lot of it falls on the reader's part. Both that the scene's very reader heavy, right? Your reader's doing a lot of the dialogue here. And your reader was very slow paced and had a lot of air in their delivery. And we had air on either end of their delivery. So a lot of the tape was really trying to muddle through the reader's part of it till we could get to the meat, which is you. And while we were muddling through it, the audio wasn't great. I couldn't understand what the reader was saying. So a good portion of what I'm viewing on this tape is I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's being said. And all I want to do is enjoy you, but I'm not really being given the opportunity to just connect because I'm still trying to parse through what in the world's going on here. So part of that's an audio quality issue. And also at the very start of it, your tape starts and immediately we are like mid-word with something your reader's saying inaudibly. And so we're not really getting that extra onboarding onto a tape. Now, obviously, if you were in the room, if this was an in-person audition, pre-pandemic, you would come in, we'd say hi to each other, there'd be a moment, you'd begin your scene, I'd know what's going on, I could hear the reader, the pacing would be better, you would end your scene, you'd say goodbye, you'd leave. We don't get that luxury anymore. It's sort of that bookending of you as a human being, of someone that I can just naturally connect with by virtue of you being a human being. And I also don't have that ability, I'm not sort of equate it to like a thing, to have that takeoff and to have that landing. Sometimes we'll call that landing like a button on a scene, or, or the takeoff might be the moment before. These are all sort of words that you probably used in acting class. We still need to make sure we have some tiny little flavor of it, even in a self-tape. I'm not asking for a full slate. I don't really need a slate. I see who you are. Every self-tape we get now has a digital fingerprint attached to it, so I don't need you introducing yourself. But out of context, and especially in a forum like this, where it's not material I know, we still just need a little bit of extra onboarding. And so those are just things to be aware of when creating a self-tape. Both when you're starting a scene, give us a moment, give us that beat before, and then jump in, ideally jumping in with high quality audio, which we didn't really have with the reader. And then at the end of it, have a true end to the scene. In the self-tape you submitted, it just, the reader was talking and then like mid-word, that was the end of the tape. It's just a little jarring. But other than that, a lot of the technical aspects, other than audio, were great. I could see you, the lighting was fine, your wardrobe was clear. And your audio was actually fine. I could, for the most part, hear you. There were some ends of sentences where it got cut off. And I don't know if that was a technical audio issue or just a little bit of vocal strength that we lost at the end of some sentences, but just something to be aware of. In the same way, in like the theatrical world, you got to just like play to the back of the house. We have to just be aware that we may need to overcompensate a little in a format like Zoom, or if you're using your iPhone as a recording device, which is totally fine. An iPhone is high enough quality to get most of what we need for a self-tape, but it may just mean being very hyper aware that some of that subtlety that would be picked up in HD isn't really picked up in a self-tape. And especially if I do know the material, I want to make sure you're connecting in the places I need you to connect. And if I can't hear you, I don't have that information to work off of. By and large, good. Just make sure you are just aware of how it's going to play to an individual who isn't intimately in the material in the way that you are. And hold our hand through it, right? Like introduce us to the character, show us that arc, and then bring us back down to reality at the end of it. This felt just a bit jarring at beginning and end, and it was complicated by the factor that I didn't know the material and I couldn't hear the reader, and most of that tape was the reader.
Thank you. I appreciate all your advices. I'm going to take note of them. And it's kind of hard because I'm using my laptop sometimes and it's not the best quality. So that might be the issue, I think so. But
Right.
you're right.
Upgrade your equipment. It's just knowing where your equipment may have a weakness and compensating for it. So again, if we know we're going to have a delay because our reader is remote, maybe your instruction reader is like, I don't need a full performance from your reader. I need them to give you just enough to play off with. You may encourage your reader, like take the air out, keep it moving. You may feel like you're cutting off your reader, but you're not. You're just getting rid of that lag time because of the technical. So it's just knowing what are your limitations and where do you need to compensate to avoid some of those limitations. I want to say thank you to Backstage for allowing me to wax poetic on self-tapes. I have found that especially in the past several months, self-tapes are really changing the game when it comes to casting. In olden days, pre-pandemic, we had a finite amount of pre-screen slots we could have when we were physically in the room pre-screening actors. And that was all dependent on budget and time and how many days we were going to be in the room pre-screening before we moved on to the next stage of casting. And that created an artificial constraint on how many actors we could see. This also created an artificial constraint on what actors we could see. And I find that self-tapes are really changing the game. They're allowing us as casting directors to take many more risks in terms of the scope of actor we can bring in for any given role. Instead of only being able to pre-screen 20 actors per role, and then in those 20, we have to bring in some actors that we are familiar with because we got to make sure at the end of the day we've found a fit somewhere, leaving us not as many actors to take risks on, actors that we have no idea anything about, but we're interested in getting to know. It's limiting. Self-tapes are not limiting. We can see an unlimited number of self-tapes because it's not costing us physical time in an audition room, and it's not taking one spot from one actor away to give to another. It's not either or, it's yes and when it comes to self-tapes. So from our end, from casting, I have found that we've really blown the door wide open on really pushing boundaries when it comes to type or gender or race or size, or you name it. We can really explore when it comes to our self-tape options. And I also think it's removed some constraints and some limitations from the actor. No longer is an actor required to be physically available to show up in Midtown Manhattan on this day and stay for an undetermined amount of time. So we're allowing caregivers and those with day jobs and those who are physically not in that location for whatever reason, either they don't live there or they're on set elsewhere. We have now taken away those limitations and said, we're not only going to pre-screen actors who have the privilege to physically be where we are for that pre-screen, we're going to see every actor who can self-tape on their own time and around their own specific needs, which I also think is going to be game-changing for our industry. I think self-tapes, by and large, are a great thing for all of us. It's great for casting directors, it's great for our creative teams, and I think it's great for actors.